Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and we're going to be talking about Grand Arena today. With Grand Arena opening up here into 5v5 for this season, I want to go over how I split characters offensively, defensively, and then even some that I don't have to give you the best advice that I can. This will help players, I think, at every aspect of the game. Again, there are certain teams that are better than others. If you really don't know that, then I would go on StarWarsGalaxyofHeroes.gg and you'll see what teams hold the most often. Again, that's a great website. But otherwise, you guys should know that, like, as you progress in the game, Geonosians go from being this amazing team on defense to one that kind of falls off. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. So we're going to get into teams like that. First and foremost, though, let's make sure you guys hit that like button, subscribe, and we've got to thank our channel members so much for their continued support. Again, if you're interested in joining, that link is down below, along with the Discord. So guys, I gotta give my respect to these guys. They support this channel, and it means so much to me and my family. Thank you guys again. Let's get in here. Let's talk about Grand Arena. Now, I always say Grand Arena is a lot like chess. Depending what teams you set on defense versus offense, I'm gonna go to 3v3 here because I don't want to completely tip my hand yet, but it's a lot like chess in that when you think of a chessboard and you're like, okay, I'm gonna set my queen down on defense, knowing that there's potential that their bishop could kill her, right? That you get what I mean, that like you're willing to trade certain pieces for other things. That I'm willing to let somebody try to counter this with Fennec. My hope is that I get a hold, but if they beat it with Fennec, I'm willing to take that risk. Same with like Leia and Rey, that I'm willing to take certain risks of what can beat those teams. Because everybody's gonna be like, oh, Starkiller beats this, and oh, Maliko's Supreme Leader Kylo Ren, Fennec beats this. At the end of the day, it's what you're comfortable. What's your risk appetite? What are you willing to let your opponent attempt to do to your defense? And that, to me, is the most important thing to understand, is that at the end of the day, you can't sit here and go, oh, well, Afra beats Jabba, so you shouldn't be setting him on defense. Maybe I'm doing that because I want to draw their Afra out. Think of those teams like Mon Mothma, General Grievous, and Iden Versio that Wampa solos. If you set all three of them on defense, that's actually a very good tactic because you're forcing them to have to do other counters against two of those teams that isn't Wampa, and they might not be prepared to do that, particularly in a 5v5 situation where you have that A-tier Mon Mothma team, and if you have to try and beat that with something else, it can get real dicey real quick. So, again, I just wanted to explain that before we get into the teams here. So, let's show you guys the teams, and again, I put like a single character for the team. You can go on StarWarsGalaxyofHeroes.gg, type in a character, and see what the most popular comps are. That's what I would recommend doing. If I showed you a composition, be like, well, what if I don't have this character? So just go on GG and check that stuff out there. So let's start with the GLs here. So I kind of split these into categories of offense, flex, and defense. For Galactic Legends, I feel pretty strongly about keeping these three for offense: Jedi Master Luke, Supreme Leader Kylo Ren, and Sith Eternal. In my opinion, they have the cheapest counters, or they're arguably the worst on defense. Kylo could kind of go both ways, but as you get further into the game, he just gets way too easy to counter. There's far too many things that beat him. With Jedi Master Luke, I'm not willing to let people just use Sith Eternal and Wat Tambor to beat him. And then with Sith Eternal, you can stop a lot of those, oh, well, Wampa beats him, but if you put Traya there, well, I'm not willing to sacrifice my Sith Eternal and Traya team just for Supreme Leader Kylo Ren to come in and murk that entire team. So that's kind of why I like to bring Sith Eternal on offense. These guys can beat a lot of teams, whether non-GL or GL. And, with Jedi Master Luke, similar situation there, that I can use him to beat Kenobi and Lord Vader and Rey and, Kylo and other things, right? I can use him to beat so many things. But also, let's say I don't need to beat a Galactic Legend with him. I can split Jedi Master Luke up with, say, Hermit Yoda and, somebody else, like, Old Ben or whoever, Shaak Ti. And then I get to use Jedi Knight Luke, Jedi Knight Revan, Grandmaster Yoda in another team. And so you build multiple Jedi teams because you bring them on offense. That's the big reason I like, is the flexibility that he offers. And then with these guys, they're kind of Swiss Army knives. Kylo's a Swiss Army knife where he can beat, Jabba and Lord Vader, even Leia in 3v3. Sith Eternal just kind of like meh right now, but with Darth Bane coming, we're definitely going to want to be using him offensively. Then Kenobi and Jabba in the flex position. Flex means that I could argue both ways. With Kenobi, he can counter so much stuff, particularly right now with the Scoundrel Cron that's around, where enemies defeated by Scoundrels can't be revived. So you'd think going up against a Jabba with Kenobi, you immediately delete Chrysanthemum, no taunt for the rest of the game. Think of, a Reva team, right? You delete Reva and bye-bye, there she goes. Or Rey, drop Rey to below 50% health, snipe Ben out, and then you're smooth sailing from there. Kenobi right now to me is in that flex category where when there's certain datacrons active, he can shift between offense and defense for me. Similarly with Jabba the Hutt, right now I'm bringing him offensively because I'm not willing to place him down when my opponent can clear him with the Dr. Afrakron, especially when he can counter Leia Organa. That's the big thing for me. The fact that he can counter Leia is what's keeping him on offense for me right now. That I'm giving up that, hey, they can beat me with Afra, and I lost a Leia counter. Then defensively, we've got Lord Vader, Rey, and Leia. One of the big things with defensive teams that I like to say is that your defensive team should be something where you don't have to tweak the strategy a lot. Think about Lord Vader, Rey, and Leia Organa. The AI plays them really well. Their kits are not specifically down to, hey, do this, this, or this. Their kits are a lot more simplistic in the sense that you don't need to be doing some of these crazier things. You think with Jedi Master Kenobi, he's always going to give Commander Tano that damage immunity at the start of battle, and then she's always going to force leap first. Well, what if you don't want to do that because you're up against a Jedi Master Luke, and so you'd rather kind of save that damage immunity so that way you could, put it on her when she can force leap somebody else, or maybe you're going up against Lord Vader and you don't want to do that. There's all these different things that happen that sometimes, think about who Jabba eats with the Rancor, that he could choose a character like, the example I would use is he could choose your Galactic Legend and now he didn't kill anybody. Or he eats Padme instead of Commander Tano. There's a lot of things that you can't always control there with these guys, where these characters on defense I feel far superior. Their kits don't need a lot of that tweaking. There's not this specific strategy of, okay, Rey, you have to give lifeblood to XYZ or else the battle's over, So I really like these characters on defense. They get really good holds. Obviously right now, I think once Leia's Kron goes away, things may change, but we'll see. So then we get down to the must-have on offense. So Wampa, this is for obvious reasons. This guy is a must-have on offense. He is a solo character, right? You can't use him with a team, so he has to go on offense. Our king must be on offense. That's a duh moment. So Captain Rex is here as a placeholder for the Phoenix team. When you get Captain Rex, the Phoenix moves to a completely offensive unit. I feel defensively, they will get beat by things that are well below them. But for what they can punch up and beat, I feel you've got to bring that Phoenix on offense. Remember, it's a chess game, and are you willing to let your rook get beat by a pawn? Absolutely not. You want to at least do an equal trade, or maybe even punch up and go after their queen or something. You got to think of it in that terms. Same thing with Imperial Troopers. Their ability to, for me, what I like about the Troopers is they've got a lot of flexibility of what they can beat. You think of the Zori teams, even that Mon Mothma A standard team, they can oftentimes beat that. They are a cleanup against Lord Vader and solo Jabbas. They can do a lot of really good things that I think we really need those Troopers for. Bad Batch, another situation where when you go on Star Wars Galaxy Fears.gg and you look up almost any team, Bad Batch is almost always one of the counters. They can counter so much stuff. They've got to be on offense for me. Defensively, they wouldn't be horrible, but it's just far easier to shut them down defensively compared to what they'll do on offense. And then finally, when you get Fennec, in my opinion, once you get Fennec, bounty hunters go from a defensive team to an offensive team. Or that they go from a flex team to you've got to have them on offense because she can beat that Lord Vader team. And that to me is worth its weight in gold when you can pull that off. Having that in your back pocket is huge. You might not always need to use it, but having that option to use it when you can is incredibly important to me. These are 5 teams right here you must have on offense. Next are flex options. Flex options mean you could place these offensively, defensively, and each one has its perks and or detractors. So Darth Traya. Darth Traya is an obvious example here. You can put her on defense and she will stop a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff that will struggle against a Traya on defense. However, offensively, she can punch up, beat some really big ticket items that otherwise would be very easy. Similar situation there with Savage Press. I should have put him next to Traya, but Savage, another one where you could put him on defense with some teams and he really does some good stuff, or you bring him offensively and he can even solo some teams. So very much like to have these characters as flex options for me. I've done both and had success both ways. Starkiller's another beautiful example of this. Obviously, he can beat Ray, which a lot more players are going to have to start using that for because everybody got Ray with these packs. That's the big thing he does offensively that everybody talks about. But he also beats a variety of other teams offensively. I mean, the Rogue One team, Zori teams, he counters. There's so much stuff that Starkiller beats. Defensively, the one thing I'd say that you got to be careful with there is that General Grievous can beat him. Imperial Troopers with Wat Tambor can beat him. And you think, oh, well, they're not going to be using Wat. When Darth Bane comes into the game and players start using Sith Eternal and Darth Bane together, Wat no longer has that, soul home with Sith Eternal. You place your Starkiller down, and I might be using Wat Tambor as an honorary Imperial Trooper. Iden Versio, another good example. Again, kind of mentioned her. Really good offensively. She does beat a lot of stuff. But defensively, I really like having her there because depending on what your opponent tries to do, she can really cause some problems. There's not a lot of counters to Iden Versio. There's some consistent ones. You think of like a General Skywalker normally will handle her Wampa, depending on how you handle with Scout Trooper and stuff. But otherwise, like there's some counters to her, but they're not cheap. And then finally, Bosk Bounty Hunters to me. Before you get Fennec, Bounty Hunters are a big flex. It really depends on what you need. I love them defensively because I feel players mess up a lot with them. Especially when you have like Boba, Dengar, and Jango Fett in there with a Bosk lead, or you put Mando and Greef in there. You get these really, really awesome teams that if you're getting ignoring taunts or AoE attacks, it can cause a lot of problems because they'll get their contract and then they just start destroying you. And it's like the big thing too is you're a Mando snipe away from losing somebody important. This is a huge, to me, it's a big flex option, really dependent on how you need to use your bounty hunters. Now, we've got my flex leaning O, right? Leaning offense. These are teams that you can flex, but I prefer to bring them on offense. Some of this comes down to they get exposed defensively, or that there's some teams that beat them on defense that I'd prefer that didn't. Big example here being like Commander Luke. The fact that Savage Press can potentially solo him, or Iden Versio can beat them, I'd rather bring him on offense and know that I'm comfortable with that. Now, he's still a very solid defensive team and can get a lot of holds and generate a lot of good stuff. And right now, especially with the Toxic Leia comp, you might want to keep Luke on defense with some other rebels. General Skywalker, another example where it's just him preventing revives is huge. That's how you can beat Iden so well. The Tuskens, even teams like Rogue One, General Skywalker can do some good things against. He is a very solid character. He can punch up and beat Darth Malgus at times. Just one of these things that I like to have him on offense in those emergency situations where, crap, I need to pull something out here. General Skywalker's that guy. And then we've got Jedi Knight Luke, Jedi Knight Revan. Again, where this comes into play is the options they give you in terms of what you can do to beat them. That when you set them on defense, there's some teams that beat them that you're not as always thrilled about. You'd be like, oh gosh, did that really work? Where I think by bringing them on offense, again, it's for me, the variety of teams that they can beat, the variety of teams that you can use them to destroy is what's important to me. And that's the most important part of their kits, is that I can go and use these guys. Like, you think Jedi Knight Luke, for those of you who are early on players, he will beat he can almost solo a Kylo Ren Unmasked First Order team. He can pretty much solo that team. If you play it right, you've got them modded well, and maybe they're not modded the greatest, he'll solo that team between his mass stun. He can't be stunned. He's got counter attacks. It is actually very, very funny. Then we've got my flex leaning defense. So again, you'll notice that there's not a lot of teams that I say you've got to set these guys on defense because everything is better on offense. Let's be very clear with that. You controlling any team is going to be better than what the AI does, because you'll also get to pick the matchup, you'll pick the moves. You are better than the AI most of the time. So there's not this have to set these guys on defense, because I recognize that a lot of it is down to personal preference. So Padme is on this list for flex leaning defense. I just think Padme as a defensive character is something where she kind of surprises people. That if you're not paying attention, they start getting that stacks of courage, and all it is one fell, hey, they got their stacks of courage, they dispelled, and it goes south quickly. And now you've got a preloaded Padme team, which can be one of the hardest things to beat, in my opinion. Darth Malgus is another one where I know all you're going to say, oh, Jedi Knight Cal beats him, but putting this guy down, you're basically, okay, Jedi Knight Cal Kestis or Sith Eternal, right? You've got the chances of the Traya team and General Skywalker, but he takes a lot to take out. He's still very solid on offense, but keeping him on defense just gives you some assurance that your opponents are going to have to do something impressive to beat him. Similar thing with Dash Rendar. I think Dash is a great character offensively, but I think on defense, especially with the right team, he just really causes a lot of problems that otherwise would not be there. Particularly, like if you don't have Fennec and you can put Beskar Mermando with Dash, oh, things get brutal. That's just such a solid team. Resistance with Zori. I mean, need I say more? This is one of the best defensive teams right now. If you don't take care of that turn meter, they're going to just absolutely murk you, and it's a big problem, right? They're a team that I think the AI plays them well enough that they'll just gain the turn meter and it won't matter. And then finally, we got Seer Junda, unaligned Force users. Again, you could put Malicos in here and stuff. They're a good team offensively, but I think right now defense is their home. They just have a little bit too much in their kit that's good, and I really think what's a lot of the benefit of the doubt here is the fact that most players don't have good counters to this yet. There's not a lot of great counters to this, so I think this is a really solid team that right now I think most players would lean more towards setting on defense. Then we've got the better on offense. So again, these are a little bit different than just calling them flex, where like the flex leaning O and leaning D, this you can make an argument either way for me, right? Same with this up here where I didn't even say offense or defense. Like these, like it's a coin flip. These guys a little bit more on the offense, a little bit more on the defense. These guys definitely better on offense, but they are solid defensive teams as well. Think the General Grievous. The reason I like him on offense, his ability to punch up and beat teams like Starkiller. He can beat Dr. Aphra at times. It's definitely Harry doing that. I don't recommend doing that. But his ability to beat Starkiller, there's some other teams I've beaten with him before that you're just like, holy crap. Like one time I beat Iden Versio. Just a really solid character. He can beat a Commander Luke Skywalker team that's not properly modded. There's a lot of good things that he can do. Similar situation there with Maul Mandalorians if you don't have Lord Vader yet. Maul Mandos is a solid team, and offensively what they can do is bonkers good. They're that kind of team that having them in your back pocket on offense, being able to punch up or get really good banners is vastly important. That same thing with like Night Sisters. You know, the Night Sisters can be solid on defense, but they're probably better on offense for the variety that they can be. Again, I talk about variety a lot, that they can just come in and clutch in certain situations because they've got hard counters, and that's the problem. Qui-Gon Jinn, similar situation. With Qui-Gon, the big thing here is that he's a one-shot wonder. Like, yes, your team held, they get a hold, and then you go and clear them the second time. They're not a team that will get you multiple holds beyond one most of the time, right? They're going to get you one hold, and then they're going to come in and clean it up. So sometimes he's better on offense because he can take out some teams that otherwise you wouldn't have a counter for. And then finally, Aphra is the same situation where she's got some hard counters like Commander Luke or even like General Hux with First Order would just really shut her down, that I think otherwise she's better to bring on offense, particularly if you have that Datacron, your opponent sets Jabba, you've got a Jabba counter as long as your mods are good, right? Like all of this is, hey, they can beat these teams if they've got good mods. Then we've got the better on defense. So characters like the Tuskens, I think are really good on defense. They're not an easy team to beat. The Rogue One team, again, just kind of, if you don't, like these teams, you'll say, oh, I know how to beat every single one of these. And I'd look at you and say, I do too. But when you do fail, right? When your Bad Batch fails against this team, oh, it can be brutal to take them out. There's counters, but they're not all like super consistent in terms of like Bad Batch. Your bounty hunters can fail at times. Like there's just some ways that this team can run away from you. Same thing with Mothma. She's a very good offensive character. A lot of people use her as a, Jabba cleanup and things, but that A-tier Mothma team can be so brutal to beat. And the big thing here is that it's about setting those teams down together that will eat up your Wampa or your Darth Vader solos, and leaving you kind of helpless. And that's where these Geonosians come into play. Geonosians for a long time are a staple on defense. They are definitely best on defense in my opinion, because offensively, like they're fine, But really, it's defense where they shine. They just are so annoying to beat. You think there's not a lot of counters to this team, all things considered. You think an equally geared, Geo team will beat a lot of other equally geared teams just because of those assists, attacks out of turn. It's miserable. And then finally, Darth Revan. I've got to put him here. I think he's a better defensive character. Even before you get Malgus, between Darth Revan, Darth Malak, Basti, and then you put in whoever else you want. Just annoying, right? That fear mechanic, death mark, even like the Imperial Troopers, which can be a counter to them. They still at times will fail or do really poorly on banners. Like this team just really, really challenging to beat. Finally, I've got this last grouping here of phase out as needed. So you've got Chief Chirpa Ewoks, Captain Phasma First Order, Akbar, Old Republic, and then like a Beskar or Mando Scoundrel team. These are teams that for some of you, these are going to be core defense teams right now. Like you can't exist without your Ewoks or your Captain Phasma or the Akbar because of light speed bundles and things. I completely agree with you guys. Like these are teams that you can be placing. Like and Finn Resistance could be here without Zori, but you phase them out as needed. That as you grow your roster and you grow your account, you start moving some of these teams away from defense simply because they're not that great. Like I can tell you that I think I was still in Kyber 3 when I finally took Ewoks off of defense. Like it took me a while to take Ewoks off of defense because my account was growing, but I needed more things for offense to beat other GLs. And so this was a team even before Relics that I was still sticking on defense, and at times they got holds, which was hilarious. So these are kind of teams that as you progress your account, you move them away from defense, admitting that, yeah, you know what, maybe they're not as good. Like Mothma could even fit here, your Geos. Like these are all teams that you'll kind of start phasing out. This one and this one you kind of keep, and this guy kind of turns into Malgus, but you phase them out. You move them away from defense because you're not going to end up using them at all, or you're using them as a cleanup team. Or in the case of Beskar Mando, you get Dash Rendar, or you get Fennec, and he needs to start going elsewhere. So that's the video, guys. That's the way that I think about teams on offense and defense for Grand Arena. Remember, at the end of the day, think about not only what will beat that team, because there's stuff that beats everything, right? There's a non-GL counter to almost every single GL outside of Leia right now. So that goes out the window. Are you willing to make that sacrifice that, hey, your Lord Vader could get beat by Fennec? Is that a trade you're willing to make? Is that a chance you're willing to take that, hey, they might fail that battle and then I get a hold? Are you willing to set your Jabba down knowing that Afra can beat him if they have the Afra Datacron? So that's the kind of questions you have to ask yourself. And again, with these things, it's the same thing. Are you willing to set General Skywalker down knowing that I can clear him with Inquisitors or CLS or, Wampa in 3v3, depending on the team? Are you willing to set your Starkiller down knowing that Imperial Troopers or Grievous could, have a chance at beating him? That's the kind of stuff that you need to figure out and ask, because it's not just about what beats them, but then what can you use to beat them on offense? That I'm not willing to set Starkiller down when Imperial Troopers plus Watt can beat him when I have a chance at beating Rey. So, again, all that said, guys, let me know your thoughts down below. Good luck this GAC season. Again, like, subscribe, comment, and if you're still watching, you guys know the drill. 10K subscribers for 2023. That's the goal. I love all you. Or 2024. Wow. Got to get used to that. I love all you. May the Force be with you, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Cheers.